Edgar Cullen had a peculiar gift for finding missing things people had lost or misplaced. His strange ability wasn't just limited to finding a misplaced pair of keys or a lost necklace, but he could even point out and find missing people himself. For this reason, he became very well known around the town for his unerring ability. This one instance, Edgar had gone on a community picnic. One of the wealthy women had dropped her golden bracelet. Edgar got up, motioning his hands to keep calm. Without asking a single question about the whole incident, he walked over to the park and bent over to pick up something. Something like that missing bracelet. How he did it was a question he would often hear, but he always gave the same reply, "I'm just gifted." Most of the time, he would recover something that would be very valuable, or a cherished possession. The owners would be so grateful to him that they would insist he take a small reward. But of course, that wouldn't be enough to sustain him and his family. Edgar didn't have any other job, and his only source of income was from the money he was awarded with. But his ability also led him to pick up money here and there that people sometimes mistakenly dropped on the street. That he would keep for himself. At the end of the day, however, it still wasn't enough to amount to the cost of his household. When he was out, he was used to the praise and the popularity he had among the community. But at home, his wife Evelyn wasn't so happy with him. She was fed up with his irresponsible behavior. She thought all Edgar did was waste his time. And in a way it was true. The family barely ever had enough money to put food on the table every day. Every time Edgar would walk through the front door of his house, his wife would start nagging as usual. She would criticize him and demanded he get a job and stop sitting around picking the ground for people's lost things. Every day would be the same. His wife would start nagging, and Edgar would storm out of the house in rage, flipping over anything that was near him and banging the door shut. Things weren't so great at home, but soon Edgar became the talk of the town, and he found himself in great demand. The police even began contacting him now and then to help them out. Edgar agreed to help the police, but for a small fee. The first time they'd ever call him was when an old woman had gone missing while she was out on a walk. When the police had lost hope of finding her, they called Edgar. It was only a matter of hours when Edgar leaded the police to the lake, where they discovered her dead body floating in the water. They concluded she may have fallen in when crossing the bridge and drowned to death. Another time, a 13-year-old boy had ran away from home. Edgar marched into the woods and found the boy hiding in a makeshift tent. He had been hiding out there for over 2 weeks, surviving off of beans and stale bread. He had developed a rash from the poisonous plants, but this time at least the victim was alive. The police thanked Edgar, and the boy's parents didn't know how they could repay him for reuniting their family. While Edgar was enjoying all the appreciation and new fame in the town, his wife began pressurizing him even more than ever, hurling personal abuses and insults at him the moment he would step into the house. It was the same every time. She told him he was the worst husband a woman could ever have. She complained he never repaired the leaking roof. She would show him her ripped clothes and complained when was the last time he had bought her a dress and took her out to eat. Things were becoming a bit too hard for Edgar to digest anymore. He was finding it difficult to control his temper, and instead of barging out like he usually did, he felt like choking Evelyn to make her shut up. The arguments never met their end, and Edgar wished for the day Evelyn would just drop dead. He dreamed of being a single man, having not to worry about anything. Things were getting so worse that he had even forgotten why he married her in the first place. He would imagine collecting all his wife's life insurance money once she died and living comfortably for the rest of his days. Things were as usual, when one summer night, Edgar got a call from the police. They needed his help. It had been 3 days since the 18-year-old girl had gone missing. Her father claimed that she had taken his speedboat out on the lake and hadn't returned. The police were able to recover the speedboat, which they found badly damaged, but the girl was nowhere to be seen. On hearing on another opportunity to increase his fame, Edgar grinned on the phone line. "Why didn't you call me earlier?" Edgar headed over to the lakeside. He walked along the bank from side to side, shaking his head while the police crew watched him anxiously. It had been about an hour, and Edgar hadn't been searching for anything. He kept pacing back and forth, The police began to assume this time Edgar would fail. Finally, Edgar turned and called the crew over to follow him to a marshy, dense spot on the opposite side of the lake. There, the girl was floating in the murky water. Her partially devoured body was tangled up in plants and weeds. Turns out, the girl was recklessly driving the boat and it crashed, throwing her out on the lake. Injuries of her head proved she may have hit her head on a rock, knocking her unconscious. She drowned in the waters and her body was floated down the lake until it became snagged by all the weeds and ended up in the marshy spot where they found her. The chief thanked Edgar for his help. "We were wrong to doubt you this time. You really have been gifted. We couldn't have found her without your help. Thanks to you, now her parents will at least be able to give her a decent burial." It was about midnight when Edgar was able to come back home. He entered his house. He found Evelyn packing her bags. At once he became furious and demanded to know where she was going. Evelyn screamed as she cried that she was leaving him forever. Edgar snapped at her. "You aren't going anywhere. You'll stay right here with me." Evelyn yelled that she regretted the day they even got married, and she should have listened to her father who told her that Edgar was a useless loser. Evelyn pulled the wedding ring out of her finger and threw it at Edgar's face. That was it. That was Edgar's breaking point. He remembered the years and years of his wife's terrible behavior, and all his anger boiled over. He became insane and attacked his wife, sending his fist flying at her. Evelyn tried to stop him, but she was no match for him. By the time Edgar came back to his senses, he found Evelyn dead on the bedroom floor. All of a sudden, terror ran through his body. He didn't want to go to jail. He didn't want the people to look down on him. But this was no time to panic. He sat back and thought of a plan. Step 1. He had to clean up all of his wife's clothes. Put the suitcase back in place, the clothes in her wardrobe. It was the first time he was actually cleaning up the house. He arranged all the furniture and belongings nicely in its place and did the bed. He had to make sure everything was absolutely normal. There shouldn't be anything in the house that the police could suspect him for. Step number 2. When night fell and the town was quiet and off to bed, he rolled up his wife's body in a carpet and stuffed her in the boot of his car. He was going to take her to the lake and drown the body there. When he got there, he made sure no one was around. He rolled the carpet out into the murky water and watched his wife's body sink under. A smile ran across his face as he waved goodbye to the evil woman. She had been pulling him down ever since he married her. The currents would push her body to the middle of the lake, and of course, he didn't forget to drop her hat and her dress in the water. The police would find them and assume that she drowned in the lake. This was the most cheerful Edgar had ever experienced in a long time. He drove back home. It was time for step number 3. He stretched out his feet and got cozy on the sofa to watch a movie and pass the time till dawn would arrive. Edgar was not an actor, but strangely he was able to pull it off, with the right level of fear and concern that one should have for his wife. "This is the police, how may I help you?" "This is Edgar. My wife has gone missing. She told me last night she was planning a surprise visit to a friend on the opposite side of the lake, and it's dawn now and she's still not home. I don't know where she is. She's not picking up my call. Please, help me." The chief came down to the house to interview Edgar himself. Fortunately, Edgar managed to pull off the act, fooling everyone how worried he was about his wife and how much he cared for her. He held his head as tears rolled down his cheeks. When the clock hit midnight and she didn't come back home, I thought, what if something terrible happened to her? "Don't worry so much, Edgar. I'm sure we will find her safe and sound." The chief patted his back and assured him. The next day, Edgar got a call from the police. The chief was hesitant to talk at first, but finally he mentioned that they found his wife's clothes floating on the surface of the lake, and they assumed that she may have drowned. Edgar let out a sigh and took a pause for just the right amount of time. "Are you there, Edgar? I know this is a tough time for you, but if you could lend us a hand, then maybe we would be able to recover her body faster." Edgar remained silent, and then he spoke, choking on his words, as if he was holding back tears. "Of course. It will be hard, but I have to find her, and this time I won't charge you anything." Edgar practiced in front of the mirror for a whole hour. He took some of his wife's makeup and managed to fake dark circles under his eyes. He wore dirty, wrinkled clothes and didn't brush his hair to pull off how depressed he was after his wife had gone away. That evening, he went down to the lake. There, he met the police crew at the dock. They had prepared a boat for him. He got onto the boat and paddled to the middle of the lake and turned his flashlight on to check the waters under him. He peeked over the boat, and as he had expected, the body would float along the currents to the middle. There it was. He saw a white, bloated hand waving back and forth with the currents. He saw the nail polish his wife was wearing. It was her. He turned and yelled at the police to send their crew. "I found her! Over here! Over here!" The police motioned back at Edgar to let him know they were coming. Just then, the hand shot out of the water and got hold on his shirt. Before Edgar could get a hold of the boat, the hand jerked him into the water. He began thrashing and kicking, his arms splashing the water rapidly, but he wasn't able to resist the pull from underneath. Edgar was dragged under the water, leaving just ripples on the surface. The police saw Edgar falling off the boat. They immediately sent a small crew on another boat to row out to the middle and help him as soon as possible. But by the time they reached there, Edgar was long gone, and the waters were still. As the rest of the crew arrived on the spot, they fished out his dead body from the lake. What was horrifying was the other corpse that came along with his one. It was the white, bloated remains of his wife that was clinging onto his body. Her bones could be seen as flesh was tearing away from her half-decomposed body. The police stared at Edgar's body. His wife's arms were wrapped tightly around his chest. Her nails were stuck in his flesh. Edgar had finally found his wife, or had his wife found him?